She had abandoned her final delivery to save a dying stranger in the pouring rain. The frail old woman she rescued turned out to be the mother of a notorious mafia boss. And now, he had decided she was family. In his world, family was everything. The rain struck Emily's face like 1,000 icy needles as she lowered her head and ran down Maple Avenue. The clock on her phone read 11:47 p.m. 3 more deliveries, and she would finally hit her weekly bonus quota. The delivery bag on her shoulder felt like a block of stone. Her sneakers soaked through. The Chinese takeout inside was probably stone cold by now. But the customer on Maple Street had prepaid without leaving a tip. So Emily didn't feel too guilty about being late. She was about to cut through the alley beside the old warehouse complex when she saw a figure slumped at the bus stop. An elderly woman, silver hair plastered to her scalp, her floral dress clinging to her thin body, one hand pressed weakly to her chest, the other reaching out to nothing. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Under the dim streetlight, her wrinkled face looked as if it were dissolving into the dark. Emily's heart sized. She glanced at the time. The next delivery was 12 minutes away. If she missed the 15-minute window, the app would flag her. 3 flags in 1 month. And her account would be locked. She already had 2. Losing this job now meant losing the matchbox-sized room she rented on the 3rd floor of a South Side apartment. But then the woman's hand slipped from her chest and fell limp. "Damn it," Emily muttered and ran toward her. She tossed her delivery bag onto the bench and dropped to her knees. Rain lashed her face and hair until she could barely see. The old woman's skin had turned bluish-gray. Her breath so shallow, it was barely there. "Ma'am, can you hear me, please?" "Ma'am." Emily shook her gently. The woman's cloudy eyes fluttered open for an instant, and a faint whisper escaped her lips. So fragile, the wind almost swallowed it whole. "Help. Me." Emily's hand trembled as she called emergency services. The dispatcher's voice was calm and clinical. "Address. Condition. Symptoms. She's barely breathing. Her pulse is weak. I think it's a heart attack," Emily said, her voice cracking. "An ambulance will arrive in 12 minutes. Do you know CPR, yes?" "I learned it 3 years ago. At the nursing home. Stay on the line. If she stops breathing, start chest compressions immediately. Don't leave her." The call ended. Emily set the phone down and checked for a pulse. Nothing. She tilted the woman's head back, pinched her nose, took a deep breath, and gave 2 quick breaths. Her hands were slick with rain and tears. She placed them over the woman's chest and began compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The counting merged with the sound of the rain. 20, 21. Her arms burned. Her shoulders screamed. But she didn't stop. 30. 2 breaths. Another 30. Time disappeared. The world shrank to the rhythm of her hands and the silent prayer in her mind. "Don't die. Please don't die." A siren wailed in the distance. Then closer. Slicing through the storm. Red lights flashed through the rain. Still. Emily pressed one last time until a hand gently pulled her back. "We've got her." "Ma'am, you did great," said a paramedic's voice. Emily slumped onto the bench, too exhausted to feel the biting cold. One medic fitted an oxygen mask over the woman's face. Another prepared the defibrillator. When the heart monitor flickered to life, someone asked, "Are you family?" "No. I just saw her." "You might have saved her life. Good work." The ambulance doors closed. But before they shut completely, Emily called out, "Can I come with her? She doesn't have anyone." The nurse met her eyes, then nodded. "Get in." Emily climbed aboard, forgetting all about the delivery bag sitting on the bench. As the ambulance tore through the curtain of rain, she watched the old woman, her breathing steadier now, her skin less ashen, and squeezed her own hands tight. She didn't know she had lost her job. Lost her night. Maybe more. The only thing left in her heart was a single, fragile thought: please, don't let her die. She had no idea that in that very moment, her life had veered onto a path from which there was no return. The siren wailed again and again, splitting the night open. Emily sat inside the ambulance, her hands still trembling, water dripping from her soaked sneakers onto the metal floor. She looked at the old woman lying on the stretcher, her face pale but tinged with a hint of pink. The oxygen mask covered half her face, her chest rising and falling faintly beneath a thin blanket. One paramedic worked the resuscitation bag. Another adjusted the monitor. On the screen, the ECG line pulsed weakly, a fragile thread holding the border between life and death. Emily tried to steady her breathing, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The scent of antiseptic, blood, and rain mixed thick in the air, making her stomach twist. A part of her still couldn't believe what was happening. 15 minutes ago, she had been just a delivery girl trying to finish her last route to pay the rent. Now she was sitting in an ambulance beside a stranger whose heartbeat depended on her hands. The young nurse next to her spoke softly, as if afraid to break the fragile calm. "You did really well. Not many people remember how to do proper CPR under pressure." Emily forced a smile, her voice hoarse. "I just reacted. I thought she was going to die right in front of me." The nurse gave her a look of both pity and admiration. Not everyone stops in a storm like that. Emily stayed quiet, clutching her hands together to keep from trembling. She listened to the slow, steady beeping of the monitor, like the faint echo of her own heartbeat. Rain drummed on the roof like 1,000 small knocks. Every second felt heavy. When the ambulance stopped at the hospital gate, the medics rushed the stretcher down the bright corridor, lit with fluorescent light. Emily followed, her heart pounding, everything blurred like a dream. The ER doors closed in front of her, leaving only the sound of the ventilator beyond the fogged glass. She stood there, drenched, hair plastered to her forehead. A nurse handed her a tissue and told her to wait on the long bench outside. She sat, cold to the bone, her mind flooded with worry. The phone in her pocket buzzed non-stop order cancellations, customer complaints, a message from the app, account temporarily suspended due to multiple late deliveries. Emily stared at the dim screen, then switched it off. She had no strength left to care. All she could see was that wrinkled hand slipping away in the rain, that faint whisper that sounded like the wind itself. "Help me." After nearly an hour, a young doctor emerged. He looked around, then stopped when he saw Emily. "You brought her in, yes?" Thank you. If you had arrived a few minutes later, her heart would have stopped completely. She's stable for now, but we'll need to monitor her overnight." Emily exhaled, tears spilling freely. "Can I see her?" The doctor shook his head. "Not yet. She's asleep. She needs rest, but she'll be better by morning." He paused, studying her more closely. "You're freezing. Go home and change." She nodded, but her feet wouldn't move. When he left, Emily stood and walked to the glass window. The old woman lay still, her face peaceful, as if merely sleeping. The soft light reflected off her fragile skin, and Emily felt her heart tighten. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "You have to live. Please, please stay alive." Then she sank back into the waiting room chair, her head leaning against the cold wall, her body hollowed by exhaustion. Outside, the rain had stopped, but inside her chest the storm still raged. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about rent or unpaid bills. All she could think of was that fragile breath, the way the old woman had looked at her in the final seconds, as if clinging to a thin thread that connected two worlds. And in that moment, Emily realized that her trembling hands, though not strong, had been enough to hold a life back from the darkness. Dawn crept over the city like a gray, heavy blanket. The rain had ended, but the air was thick with moisture and the faint smell of wet smoke rising from the streets. Emily sat on the hard plastic chair in the hospital waiting area, her eyes swollen and red after a sleepless night. She couldn't remember when she drifted off. She only knew that when she opened her eyes, pale morning light was spilling through the window, washing over the faces of patients waiting outside. The thin jacket draped over her shoulders had stiffened with dried rain. She stood, feeling the ache spread across her shoulders and neck, and walked toward the nurse's station. The elderly lady from last night. "How is she?" she asked quietly, her voice hoarse from the cold. The nurse looked up and flipped through the night log. "Mrs. Eleanor Moretti, 73. Her heart stable. She was moved to intensive care this morning." "Are you family?" Emily shook her head. "No. I just brought her here." The nurse nodded slightly, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "You're lucky. Her son just arrived. He seems to be an important man." Emily frowned, not understanding. She stepped into the corridor, intending to leave, but then saw a group of people entering through the main doors. They moved together, dressed in dark tailored suits, walking with sharp precision, their eyes cold, as if wrapped in a thin veil of frost. Leading them was a tall man with straight posture, silver-streaked hair neatly combed back, a chiseled face, and eyes that gleamed like steel. He murmured something to the man beside him, and the group advanced toward the restricted ward. As he passed, Emily caught a whiff of something, a mix of men's cologne and cigarette smoke, the kind of scent that seemed to thicken the air. On his jacket pocket was a small gold pin, engraved with the letter M. A nurse whispered to another, "That's Vincent Moretti. He's Mrs. Eleanor's son." Emily froze. The name rang in her head like a distant bell. Moretti. She'd heard it somewhere before. She pulled out her phone and searched the name on instinct. The first headline made her blood run cold. Vincent Moretti, business magnate. Investor. Suspected links to Chicago's underground network, also known as the Gray Gentleman. Her heart thudded hard. The man who had just walked down that hallway, whose presence alone thickened the air. It was one of the most powerful figures in the city, and the old woman she had saved was his mother. She closed the phone, her thoughts spinning. Part of her wanted to leave immediately. The other part couldn't bring herself to go until she knew the woman was truly safe. While she stood there, torn, 2 bodyguards passed by, murmuring into their earpieces. "The boss wants no one near the room for the next hour." Emily turned away, afraid that even a glance in the wrong direction might bring her trouble. She slipped out to the back courtyard, where the faint sunlight filtered through the trees. Her hands still tingled, as if the old woman's warmth lingered there. She thought of the night before the rain, the faltering heartbeat, the clouded eyes that had struggled to open one last time before the ambulance arrived. Whoever that woman was, whether the mother of a powerful man or just another forgotten soul, Emily knew she would have done it all over again, because in that moment, the line between power and humanity had ceased to exist. She sat down on a stone bench, pulled out her phone, and reopened the delivery app. A red notice flashed across the screen. Account suspended for 7 days. She sighed softly and lifted her gaze to the pale sky. A deep voice sounded behind her. "You're the one who saved my mother." "Aren't you?" Emily turned. A man in a gray suit stood there, calm-eyed but sharp, with 2 men in black lingering behind him like shadows. She didn't need anyone to tell her. She knew instantly it was Vincent Moretti. Her heart pounded as she rose to her feet. But before she could speak, his voice came again, low yet commanding. "I owe you a life. And I don't forget debts. His voice was husky. Et raisonnant par gratitude. Par déclaration. Emily wasn't sure what he meant. She only knew she was standing before a man who could change a person's fate with a single nod. I just did what anyone should have done, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Vincent studied her, his gaze devoid of threat, yet heavy with something unreadable curiosity. Maybe reflection. No, he said, his tone calm but firm. You did what most would have walked past. Without you, my mother wouldn't be here. He stepped closer and drew a white envelope from his pocket. I'd like you to accept this. Just a token of gratitude. Emily looked from the envelope to his solemn face. She could guess what was inside money. Likely a lot of it. But what unsettled her wasn't the money. It was the man himself, the way he spoke. The way the world seemed to hush when he moved. As if space itself yielded to his presence. I can't accept it, she said, shaking her head. I didn't save her for money. Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, faint. Strange. Almost like light passing through smoke. He smiled slightly. Barely visible. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it more than anyone who's ever owed me a favor. He set the envelope on the bench beside her and turned to his bodyguard. Record her name. Emily Carter. She replied before she could stop herself, though unease stirred inside her. Carter. Vincent repeated, his voice dropping lower. A name that's easy to remember. He studied her for a moment longer. His gaze had softened. It no longer felt cold, but measured. Do you have family? Emily. She hesitated. No. I live alone. And you work as a delivery driver? Yes. He nodded slowly, as if storing each piece of information somewhere behind his calm expression. This city isn't kind to good people. I hope you know how to protect yourself. The words carried the weight of both advice and warning. Then he turned and walked away, his men following, the sound of polished shoes echoing softly against the tiles. And there, in that pale hospital courtyard at sunrise, Emily had no idea her life had just entered, a chapter she could never walk back from. Emily stood still, watching the tall figure disappear down the hospital corridor. When she turned back, the envelope remained untouched on the bench. She opened it out of sheer curiosity, and her hand began to tremble. Inside was a check, $50,000, with a few rough words scrawled across the bottom for saving my mother. V. M. Emily gasped softly. $50,000 more than she had earned in 3 years combined. But at the same time, a chill crawled down her spine. She folded the check, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it exactly where it had been. When she looked up, she saw Trevor watching her from a distance. He gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging her choice. After they were gone, Emily sat there for a long while. Everything still felt unreal, as if the night before had been nothing more than a long, vivid dream. Then her phone vibrated. A new message appeared. Thank you for staying with my mother. V. M. There was no number. No name, only those 3 initials that sent a shiver through her chest. Vincent Moretti. She locked the screen, tucked the phone away, and tried to convince herself it was just a message of gratitude from a powerful man. Yet somewhere deep inside, she knew something had begun. That afternoon, when she left the hospital, 2 black SUVs were still parked along the side street. Inside one, a man lowered his window and spoke quietly into a radio. She didn't take the money. The voice on the other end was deep and steady. Good. Keep an eye on her. Emily didn't know it yet. But amid the crowds and traffic of Chicago, unseen eyes were already tracking her every step, as if she had unknowingly stepped into a world where the exits were no longer hers to choose. That evening, the sky over Chicago hung heavy and gray, as though even the sun had grown weary of shining on a city full of secrets. Emily returned to her small Southside apartment. Chilled by the wind and burdened by everything that had happened, she set her bag down on the table, pulled off her soaked shoes, and drew the envelope from her coat pocket. It was crumpled from the rain, but the check inside was still perfectly intact. The number, $50,000. Sharp and undeniable. She stared at it for a long time, a mix of awe and dread churning inside her. It wasn't just a check. It was a blurred line between gratitude and debt, between kindness and something much darker. She powered on her old laptop, the screen casting a pale light over her tired face. Her pulse quickened as she typed the name she'd heard that morning, Vincent Moretti. The search results appeared instantly. Pages upon pages of headlines and photographs filled the screen. Real estate tycoon Vincent Moretti, the man no one dares to cross. The Moretti Empire, from construction to finance. And the whispers beneath it all. Explosion at the harbor in 2017 was the Moretti family involved. Emily felt her stomach turn to ice. In one photo, Vincent stood among a line of men in black suits. Expression unreadable. Eyes dark and steady. The caption read, Vincent Moretti, heir to the Moretti family, one of Chicago's most influential dynasties. Police suspect involvement in organized financial crimes and violence, though no charges have ever been filed. She scrolled slowly, each sentence tightening around her like a noose. One anonymous post on a forum read, Vincent Moretti never repays a favor without expecting twice as much in return. She swallowed hard. Under the dim yellow light, the check on her table seemed to glow with a cold gleam. $50,000. Enough to pay every debt, move out of this crumbling apartment, and start again. But what would happen if she accepted it? A voice whispered in the back of her mind. He already told you in his world. Debts are never forgotten. She closed the laptop, her breath unsteady. Outside, distant sirens echoed faintly through the city's night, hollow and far away. Then her phone buzzed again. A new message. No name. No number. Are you all right? Emily Carter. Her heart thudded violently. Her fingers trembled as she typed back. Who is this? It took a few seconds before the reply came. A grateful man. Don't worry. No one will harm you. But don't go out tonight. She dropped the phone onto the table, unease spreading through every vein. Rushing to the window, she pulled the curtain aside just enough to peek out. Across the street, a black SUV sat motionless. Inside, a faint blue glow from a phone screen illuminated the blurred outline of a man watching her building. Emily stepped back, heart pounding. It was all too clear now she was being watched. Her gaze drifted to the check again, now lying like a silent trap in the half-light. She slid it into a drawer and locked it. But even hidden away, she knew it had already changed everything. The next morning, when she stepped outside, the first sunlight touched the red brick buildings, but it brought no warmth. At her doorstep lay a bouquet of white flowers, perfectly arranged, with a small card tucked inside. In elegant handwriting it read, Because kindness is never forgotten. V. M. Emily looked around, but there was no one there, only the wind, stirring the edges of the note. She knew then that from that moment on, she had become a marked name in Vincent Moretti's world, a world where kindness could become a curse, and gratitude could be the most dangerous thing of all. Monday morning passed beneath a thin veil of mist and an unsettling silence. Emily stood by her apartment window, holding a cup of cold coffee, her eyes fixed on the street below. Everything looked ordinary, people hurrying to work, car horns echoing in the distance, the thin plume of steam rising from the bakery across the street. Yet among the crowd, she saw something wrong. Two men, both wearing dark coats, stood near the black SUV she had seen the night before. They weren't smoking, weren't talking, just standing there. One leaned against the car, the other crossed his arms, scanning the street as if waiting for someone. Every time Emily moved, one of them lifted his head slightly, as though sensing her presence. A chill rippled down her back. She drew the curtains closed, telling herself she was being paranoid, but her heart refused to listen. She turned on the TV to drown the quiet. The morning news was airing a segment on Chicago's dynastic families and their influence in politics. The screen flashed briefly with footage of Vincent Moretti stepping out of a stone building, face impassive, bodyguards close behind. The anchor's voice droned evenly. Sources say Vincent Moretti is expanding into private healthcare investments. Some analysts believe this move is meant to conceal questionable financial activity within Moretti Holdings. Emily switched off the TV instantly. The name clung to her like smoke. She sat back down, wondering if saving a life could truly lead to being watched like this. But then she remembered last night's message. Don't go out tonight, and the bouquet with the note on her doorstep. It wasn't coincidence. Someone was watching her. Someone who knew where she went. What she did, perhaps even what she thought. She picked up her phone to call the police, but hesitated. What would she even say that two men were standing on the street watching her? That a powerful man had sent her flowers as thanks? They'd laugh her off. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, feeling helpless. By noon, when she finally left the apartment to buy food, the SUV was still there. One of the men was speaking into an earpiece, his gaze flicking toward her just long enough to freeze her blood. She pretended not to notice, quickened her pace. But the weight of that stare followed her. Inside the small grocery store, she caught their reflection in the convex mirror above the counter. One of them had stopped just outside the door. Her hand shook. The carton of milk slipped from her grasp and shattered on the floor. The shopkeeper looked startled. "You okay?" "Emily," he asked gently. She nodded too quickly. Paid, and hurried outside. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She cut across 2 blocks, turned down a narrow alley, and stopped to catch her breath. Ahead was a shortcut leading to the park. Behind her, the main street. She pressed herself against the wall, heart racing. 1 minute passed, 2, then 3. From the end of the alley, footsteps heavy, deliberate. The 2 men appeared, glancing around. One spoke in a low, unfamiliar accent. He said she won't go far. Keep your distance. Don't scare her. Emily knew exactly who they meant. She bit her lip, holding her breath. When they passed, she slipped the other way, hurrying down the back route. Her mind a tangled blur. Why was Vincent having her followed? To protect her or to control her? She remembered the look in his eyes at the hospital courtyard, calm, steady, yet holding something impossible to define, not quite kind, not quite cruel. Back in her apartment, she double-locked the door, pulled the curtains tight, and sank to the floor. The only light came from the drawer where the check still lay untouched. She opened it again, staring at the number, her throat tight. Somewhere below, the engine of the SUV rumbled, then fell silent. She knew they were still there, only a few floors beneath her. She lifted her head, eyes heavy but resolute. Maybe the only way to end this nightmare was to uncover the truth about the man in the gray suit, and why he had decided she belonged to his world. 3 days later, Emily woke to the sound of heavy pounding on her door. The sharp rhythm jolted her upright, her heart thudding hard against her ribs. Since everything that had happened, every unexpected noise set her nerves on edge. She peered through the peephole and saw a familiar, plump face kindly at first glance, but with something sly behind the smile. It was Mr. Wanther, Blake, her landlord. His grin didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, Emily. We need to talk," he said, drawing out the words. As if holding something back, she cracked the door, keeping her hand on the lock. "What is it?" "Mr. Blake, this month's rent. And A few small issues with your lease. He pushed the door a little farther, forcing her to step back. I already paid, she said quickly, trying to stay calm. 2 days late. Emily, you know the rules. His eyes darted around the room. A place like this, someone like you only gets to rent it because I'm easygoing. But there's been talk. Word is you've come into some money. Haven't you? Emily froze. What are you talking about? I heard someone saw a man come by looking for you expensive car. Gray suit. You took an envelope. What are you hiding? His tone was half sneer, half curiosity. She understood instantly. Someone in the building had seen Vincent or his men that morning at the hospital. Rumors spread fast in this neighborhood, faster than fire on dry grass. Emily clenched her fists. He was just thanking me for helping his mother. That's all. Mister. Blake's smile twisted. Helping his mother. Huh? You sure know where to be charitable. But let's be honest, if you're getting that kind of money, maybe your rent should go up. Emily took a deep breath, fighting the anger rising in her chest. You can't do that. The lease is clear. I can terminate it, he said coldly. If you bring trouble to the building, people are talking. Even the cops stopped by asking what you were doing that night. I don't like problems. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Notice to vacate. You have 1 week. Her body went numb. Mr. Blake, please, I have nowhere else to go. He shrugged and turned away. Maybe ask the man in the gray suit for help. Seems like he could take better care of you than I can. The door shut behind him, leaving the sound of wind whistling through the window frame. Emily sank onto the chair, burying her face in her hands. Everything was collapsing at once, her job gone, her account suspended, and now even the roof over her head was slipping away. She walked to the window and looked down at the street. The 2 men were still there. Now they were speaking with Mr. Prossetts. Blake, exchanging a few words before glancing up at her 3rd-floor window. One of them lifted his phone, as if taking a photo of the building. Instinctively, she stepped back. Fear coiled inside her, the sense that someone else was pulling the strings of her life without ever asking her permission. Her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. You don't need to be afraid. Everything will be handled. Don't sign anything with Blake. V. M. Emily stared at the screen, her heart tightening with confusion and dread. He knew about the eviction. He knew everything, which meant he was still watching her. She wanted to throw the phone, but her hands wouldn't obey. The shadows of those men on the street had become her waking nightmare. The kindness she'd once been proud of, the act of compassion on that rainy night, had turned into a weight crushing her life. When night fell, she sat alone in the dark room, listening to the engines below and wondering whether saving a stranger had been the right thing, or if it had opened a door into a world where kindness came with a price no one could afford. That night, Chicago lay under a blanket of fog, neon lights bleeding into puddles left by the rain. Emily couldn't sleep. She lay curled on the couch, watching the flickering light from the window dance across the ceiling. Mr. Blake's words echoed in her head, along with the image of the 2 men standing silently on the street. She felt as though someone out there was waiting for her to make a single mistake, then knock. The phone on the table lit up suddenly. No name, just a string of numbers. She stared at it, hesitated, then picked up. Emily Carter. The deep, gravelly male voice was calm, deliberate enough to make her stop breathing. She didn't have to ask who it was. That voice was etched into her memory from the morning at the hospital. Mr. Vincent, I hope I'm not disturbing you. His tone was gentle, but carried something that made her pulse quicken. I just wanted to be sure you're safe. I'm not, she said, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. Your men are outside my building. Mr. Blake just threw me out. I don't even know what's happening anymore. There was a pause long enough to make her wonder if the line had gone dead before his voice returned. Lower this time. You don't have to fear them. They're there to protect you. Protect me. She gave a brittle laugh. I don't need protecting. I just want to be left alone. If you want peace, you'll have to listen to me. The words weren't loud, but they carried the quiet weight of command. Emily said nothing. All she could hear was the wind whistling faintly through the receiver. You're being watched, Vincent said slowly. Not just by me. Someone else is looking for you because you saved my mother. That night wasn't random. She had been under surveillance for months. You stumbled into something you were never meant to see. Emily sat up, gripping the phone tightly. You mean someone wanted to hurt her, possibly. And now they think you know something. You don't, but that doesn't matter. In their eyes, you're involved. His voice dropped to a near whisper. I need you to trust me. Emily, leave your apartment tonight. I'll send someone to pick you up. No. The word came out instantly. I'm not going anywhere. I don't want any part of this. A quiet sigh came through the line. I understand. But if you're still there by morning, I can't promise who will reach you first, my people or theirs. The words sent a cold tremor through her body. Why are you doing this? I never asked for your help. Because you saved the one person who means everything to me, Vincent said, his tone softening. And I won't let your kindness be repaid with fear. Emily couldn't speak. In the darkness, his voice carried a strange warmth, not like a ruthless man's, but like someone who truly cared. Pack a few things, he continued. In 15 minutes. A car will be waiting at the end of your street. They won't hurt you. They'll take you somewhere safe. If you want to leave afterward, he won't stop you. Can I trust you? She whispered, almost pleading. No, Vincent said quietly, but you can trust what I owe you. Then the line went dead. Emily stared at the dark screen, her mind spinning. Outside, the faint hum of an engine rose low and steady, like the city's exhale. She went to the window and drew back the curtain. The black SUV was still there, lights off, but she could see the outline of a man inside. Looking up, she turned back to the room, the worn wooden table, the few scattered belongings, the meager fragments of a life. 15 minutes. She didn't know whether she could trust Vincent, but fear had long since eclipsed reason. She stuffed a few clothes into a bag, grabbed her wallet and phone, and stepped toward the door. As she descended the narrow stairwell, shadows seemed to close in around each step. The outer door creaked open, letting in the chill of the night mixed with the scent of exhaust. A man in a black suit opened the car door for her without a word. As it closed behind her, Emily caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror, the glow of a streetlight spilling across the empty road, and a figure standing on the far side, watching her. His eyes gleamed faintly in the dark, as if he already knew from this moment on. Emily Carter had crossed fully into Vincent Moretti's world. The SUV rolled quietly through the dimly lit streets, its engine so soft that Emily could hear nothing but the frantic rhythm of her own heartbeat. The driver was completely silent. His face ghosted in the pale blue light of the dashboard, cold, unreadable. Outside, the city lay in heavy slumber, yet every nerve in her body was stretched taut as wire. She had no idea where she was going, only that she was leaving behind the only place she had ever called home. When the car turned down a deserted road near the industrial district, something in her gut twisted. She glanced back. A gray sedan was following, keeping its distance, but steady. She opened her mouth, but the driver spoke first, his voice low and rough. Stay quiet. Buckle up. The warning sent ice through her veins. The sedan's headlights suddenly flared to life, glaring through the rearview mirror. Then came a screeching impact. Metal slammed into metal, the jolt snapping her forward. Damn it, the driver growled, swerving sharply into a narrow alley. Emily was thrown sideways, her head striking the window. The world spun dizzy and muffled. but through the glass she saw them 2 men stepping out of the gray sedan. One of them, the same face she'd seen outside her building, under the streetlight. Something in their hands caught the light. Guns. Down the driver shouted. The rear window exploded. A bullet tore through the trunk. Emily screamed, curling instinctively into herself. The car shot forward like a frightened animal, tires screeching. But the alley dead-ended in a crumbling brick wall. "No," the driver muttered, jerking the wheel too late. 2 sharp cracks split the night. The windshield shattered, blood splattered across the dashboard. The man slumped, his shoulder torn open. Emily's scream caught in her throat. She fumbled with the door handle, stumbled out, and ran blind with fear. Footsteps thundered behind her. A gunshot cracked, a bullet sparking off the wall inches from her head. She tore through another alley, darker this time, lit only by a flickering sign above a shuttered shop. Rain began to fall again, cold. Sudden. Blinding. She slipped, scraping her palm on the wet asphalt, but forced herself up and kept running. A man's voice echoed behind her. "Keep her alive, mister. Marone wants her in one piece." Her heart lurched. She'd never heard the name before, but instinct told her it wasn't one of Vincent's. Then, from the opposite end of the alley, came the growl of another engine, louder. Closer. Headlights sliced through the rain, flooding the alley with white light. A black car skidded sideways, blocking the path between her and her pursuers. The door flew open. A tall figure stepped out, his shirt drenched, his eyes hard as steel. "Get in the car." "Emily." Vincent's voice wasn't raised, but it carried the weight of command, the kind that stopped the world mid-breath. She hesitated only for a heartbeat. Then a bullet struck a trash bin beside her, sending metal flying. Panic took over. She ran toward him. Vincent grabbed her by the arm, pushed her into the back seat, then turned his gun already drawn. 3 shots. Fast and precise. One man dropped instantly, the other staggered, clutching his side before vanishing into the shadows. Vincent didn't chase him. He knelt beside his wounded driver. "Check the pulse. He's alive," he murmured, signaling another man from a second car to help. Emily sat frozen, trembling as rain hammered against the windows. When Vincent climbed in, water dripped from his coat onto the floor mats. His face was composed but burning with restrained fury. "I told you weren't safe there." His voice was low, but sharp enough to cut. "Who were they?" she asked, her voice shaking. "People who think you know too much. A man named Tony Marone is trying to send a message." A message. Vincent looked out through the rain-blurred glass. "That your kindness comes with a price, and that anyone who touches my mother pays one far greater." He turned back to her, his eyes softening for just a moment. "From now on, you don't take your eyes off me. Not for a single second." The car sped into the rain, leaving behind the echo of sirens and the crimson stains fading on wet brick. Emily didn't know what world she had entered, only that, for the first time, Vincent Moretti had shown exactly who he was, and she knew there was no going back. By dawn, the SUV pulled up before a wrought iron gate outside a secluded estate, where the mist and amber lights made the world beyond feel unreal. Emily stepped out, her legs trembling, clothes soaked and streaked with the blood of the wounded driver. Vincent emerged after her, gun still in hand, his face so cold that no one dared speak. The gate opened slowly. A man in a black suit bowed his head. "Everything is ready." "En sire?" Vincent nodded once, then turned to her. Inside, Emily hesitated. The air here felt different, not safer, just heavier. Inside, wide corridors lined with polished wood glowed beneath chandelier light. But the grandeur held no warmth, only the silence of power. She followed him past armed men who stood like statues, their expressions empty, The feeling of being rescued and imprisoned at once made her chest tighten. In a closed room, Vincent sat down and gestured for her to do the same. "I know you have questions. You can ask them now." Emily clenched her hands together. "I don't understand any of this. Who is Tony Marone? And why would anyone want to hurt me just because I saved your mother?" Vincent studied her for a long moment before answering. "Tony Marone was once my father's partner. Now he's my enemy. He wants to weaken me by targeting the people I care about. When you entered my mother's life, you became part of that target." He paused, his tone lowering. Tonight was only a warning. A wave of fear rippled through her chest. "And what if I don't want to be part of any of this?" Vincent's gaze sharpened, cutting through the air. "You don't have that choice anymore. You saved my mother. That means you fall under my protection now." "Protection," she whispered. "Or control?" The room fell silent. Vincent didn't answer right away. He leaned back, rubbed his temples, and spoke quietly more to himself than to her. "I used to believe the law could protect the innocent. But in this city, justice and power never walk the same road. So I built my own kind of justice." He lifted his eyes to hers, steady, weary, yet unwavering. "Tonight, if you'd called the police, they would have come. But before asking your name, they would have called Maroni. Do you understand now?" Emily said nothing. Each word sank into her like stone. Part of her wanted to argue, to cling to the belief that something called righteousness still existed, but another part knew he was right. "The price of protection," Vincent continued, "is accepting what I have to do to keep you safe, even when it doesn't look right to the rest of the world." He rose and walked toward the window, where dawn was breaking, painting the mist gold. "I'll have men stationed outside your room. No one gets in. Rest. By morning, I'll take care of the rest." Emily stood, her voice trembling. "What will you do to them? The ones who attacked me?" Vincent turned back, a faint smile crossing his lips, not cruel, but certain. "Justice." He said it simply, and left. The door closed with a sound barely louder than a sigh. Yet its echo made her shiver. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. The first light of morning spread over the city, the glass towers catching it like shards of broken mirrors. She thought of the wounded driver, of the gunfire, of Vincent's cold, unwavering eyes as he pulled the trigger. And in that moment, she understood he hadn't saved her out of duty, but out of principle. A principle that didn't answer to judges or police. Vincent Moretti's justice was the kind that lived only in darkness. And she, whether she wanted it or not, now stood on that fragile edge where kindness learned to live beside violence. And every breath came with a price of its own. Morning in the Moretti estate was unnaturally quiet. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, glinting off the steaming cup of tea on the wooden table, casting soft golden streaks that Emily could not feel. She sat in the vast living room, wrapped in the thin cardigan a maid had given her, eyes still heavy with the weariness of a sleepless night. Everything felt like a dream. She couldn't wake from the attack, the gunfire, and the man who had pulled her out of death's reach with unnerving calm. Vincent had vanished at dawn, leaving behind only a short message. Rest. At noon, you'll meet someone. She didn't know who that someone was, but her heart sensed it before her mind did. The door opened. A middle-aged nurse stepped in, her voice gentle. "Miss Emily." "Mrs. Eleanor is awake. She would like to see you." Emily's heart tightened. That name, Eleanor Moretti, was the center of everything. She rose and followed the nurse down a long hallway where every framed painting whispered of a world far removed from the one she'd known, a world where poverty and rain-soaked deliveries did not exist. The faint scent of antiseptic mingled with lavender guided her to a grand room at the end of the corridor. The door creaked open, letting light spill in. On the pristine white bed lay the woman Emily had dragged from the storm that night. She looked thinner now, her face pale and hollow. but her eyes were still bright, gentle, and alive. When Emily entered, Eleanor smiled weakly, yet with warmth that filled the space. "It's you, isn't it?" Her voice trembled, but it was clear. The girl in the rain. Emily froze, her throat tightening. "You, remember I do," Eleanor said softly. "Your face, your hands cold and shaking, but still holding on to mine. I could never forget." Tears blurred Emily's vision before she even realized she was crying. Eleanor reached out a frail hand, and Emily stepped closer, taking it carefully in her own. "I only did what anyone would have done," she whispered. "No," Eleanor said, shaking her head. "Not everyone would. In this world, people turn away when they see blood. But you knelt in the rain to save a stranger. You pulled me back from the edge." A gentle stillness settled over the room. Outside, wind brushed through the rose garden, and the sunlight pooled across the floor. As if affirming every word the older woman spoke, Emily's voice was quiet. "How are you feeling now?" "Well enough to know there's still work left undone," Eleanor said, her gaze drifting toward the window before turning back to Emily. "Vincent told me about you, that you didn't just save me, but got caught up in something you shouldn't have. I'm sorry. My dear, my son sometimes lets power speak louder than compassion. He saved me," Emily said softly, her voice breaking with emotion. "If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here." "I know," Eleanor smiled faintly, "but Vincent doesn't save people gently. He believes fear is the only way to protect. And that's where he's wrong." Her grip on Emily's hand tightened, weak but full of feeling. "You are something rare, something he doesn't yet understand. Kindness that asks for nothing in return, only to be met with the same. I want you to help him remember that." Emily looked up, startled. "Me? Help him?" "Yes," Eleanor replied, her eyes shining with quiet conviction. "You don't realize it, but it's been a long time since Vincent stopped for someone outside his world. You've made him see something money and power could never buy." For a moment, warmth flowed from Eleanor's fragile hand into Emily's, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She nodded. "Ainsi l'on promise." When she left the room, Vincent was standing at the end of the corridor, half his face lit by sunlight, the other half in shadow. He said nothing, just watched her, and for the first time since they'd met, his eyes weren't cold. They held something unmistakably human, beneath the high arches of the Moretti estate. Emily realized something simple yet profound. Even the smallest act of kindness could awaken a soul long accustomed to darkness. That afternoon, the sky over Chicago was a pale gray, holding its breath after a rain that hadn't yet fallen. Emily stood outside the small temporary residence Vincent's men had arranged for her, holding her cracked old phone, the same one that had survived the ambush. Ever since meeting Eleanor that morning, her thoughts had been in turmoil. Every word the woman had said echoed in her mind that Vincent needed to learn how to love again, that she might be the one to remind him how. She didn't know if she was strong enough for that, but the gentle certainty in Eleanor's eyes made it impossible to refuse. The phone buzzed. A message appeared from the number she knew by heart. "Be ready. A car will arrive in 20 minutes. My mother would like to have dinner with you. Signed, as always, V. M." Emily exhaled slowly, her pulse quickening. She caught her reflection in the small mirror by the wall, a face both anxious and unfamiliar. She had never been to a rich man's home, never sat at a table guarded by armed men. But this time, she knew she couldn't turn away. The car arrived right on time, a sleek black sedan, door already open. The driver, dressed in a suit, gave a polite nod without a word. The road to the Moretti estate wound through rows of maple trees shedding their leaves, each one tapping softly against the glass like fragments of forgotten memories. When the car stopped before the great iron gates, Emily felt as though she were crossing into another world. The gates, intricately wrought, opened with deliberate grace. Inside, golden light lined the cobblestone path, leading to a grand house draped in ivy and thyme. The guard by the gate nodded in greeting, and then a familiar voice called from the steps. "Welcome, Emily." Vincent stood at the entrance, still in his gray suit, but something in his demeanor had changed, less rigid, more human. He descended a few steps and extended his hand. "I hope the drive wasn't too unpleasant." "No," she said softly, her fingers tightening nervously. "I just don't know why Mrs. Eleanor wanted to see me again. My mother rarely meets anyone twice," he replied, a faint smile curving his lips, though his eyes remained deep and unreadable. "She must think you're worth it." The doors opened, spilling warm light into the evening air. Laced with the faint scent of roses from the garden beyond, the mansion exuded a solemn, classical beauty, flawless, intimidating. Emily felt small within it, but when Eleanor appeared at the top of the staircase, dressed in a pale silk gown, her kind smile seemed to soften the entire room. "Emily, I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice gentle despite her frailty. Emily approached, bowing her head slightly. "I hope I'm not intruding." "You could never intrude," Eleanor said warmly. "There are people who bring peace just by being near, and you are one of them." Vincent pulled out a chair for his mother, then gestured for Emily to sit across from them. The table was laid with delicate precision, candlelight flickering over the faces of 3 people, one powerful, one fragile, and one who didn't yet know where she belonged among them. The conversation began lightly about the weather. Small things, stories of rainy nights Eleanor still remembered. But soon, her gaze shifted to Vincent, her expression turning solemn. "Do you know when the last time I invited someone into this house for dinner was?" she asked. 10 years ago." Vincent answered quietly. "Yes," she said slowly. "And that night, I lost a true friend. I don't want you to repeat that. Vincent, don't turn everyone around you into a tool. Some people enter your life to remind you that you're still human." Then she turned to Emily, her eyes softening again. "Thank you, Emily, for making my son stop." Even for a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. She simply felt the air in the room grow still. Vincent didn't respond, didn't interrupt. He only stared at the flickering flame between them, lost in thought. When dinner ended, Eleanor spoke once more. "I'd like you to visit more often, Emily. Not as a guest, but as family." Emily looked up, stunned. "Vincent's Gazemeters." He said nothing, but his eyes for the first time held more than gratitude or obligation. They held trust. As the iron gates closed behind her that night, Emily realized something strange. Though the world she was leaving belonged to power and danger, something within it, within him, had quietly opened. Perhaps for the first time, she wasn't just entering Vincent Moretti's world. She was becoming a part of it. After that dinner, Emily began to realize that the Moretti estate was more than a refuge. It was another world, one built on rules, secrets, and absolute loyalty. The iron gates had opened for her, but they had also quietly sealed every way back. Everyone in the house looked at her differently. The maids bowed but never met her eyes. A few watched her in silence whenever she passed through the hallways. The feeling of being watched lingered around her like a thin veil of fog she couldn't brush away. That morning, when she stepped out toward the rose garden for air, a woman in her 40s approached, blonde hair, neatly tied back, dressed in a plain black dress. Her voice was smooth, polite, but held a cool edge. "Miss Carter, I'm Marissa, the housekeeper. I've been told Mrs. Eleanor wants you to stay for a few days." Emily nodded, keeping her tone courteous. "Yes, I'm just helping her a little while she recovers. Marissa smiled faintly, though her eyes didn't. I see. But you should know not everyone is comfortable with outsiders in this home. Mr. Vincent is closely observed. People will have questions. The words were soft, almost gentle, but they made Emily's skin prickle. I don't mean to intrude, she said quietly. I'm only doing what Mrs. Comberby. Eleanor asked. I'm sure you are. Marisa replied, and turned to leave, her expensive perfume lingering in the air long after she was gone. Emily stood motionless for a while. The sky was bright and blue, yet the sunlight over the garden felt heavy, as though even beauty here carried weight. When she returned inside, 2 men were speaking in low tones by the corridor. They stopped the moment they saw her. She caught a few scattered words: the girl in the rain, the master's protection. That thread of unease tightened around her chest again, making every breath feel shallower. At noon, when she carried tea into Eleanor's room, she stopped at the door. Voices came from inside, raised, tense. Vincent's low but restrained mother. You don't understand. She shouldn't be here. She's becoming a distraction. That's exactly why you must keep her close. Eleanor replied, her tone frail but unyielding. If anyone wants to hurt this family, they'll go after the one you try to protect. At least here. She's safe. Emily froze, heart pounding. She didn't dare knock. Quietly, she set the tray down and slipped away, but the fragments of their words followed her like echoes she couldn't escape. That afternoon, as she stepped outside, the familiar black car stood near the gate. A tall man in a navy suit emerged younger, sharper. His gaze swept over her, cool and assessing. You must be Emily Carter. Yes, she said cautiously. I'm Dominic Moretti, he said. His voice carried the same deep timbre as Vincent's, but was quicker, edged with something harder. Vincent's brother. Emily stiffened slightly. It's an honor to meet you. Dominic smiled a smile without warmth. I've heard a lot about you. The woman who made my brother break his own rules. He doesn't do that often. You know, she didn't know how to respond. Her fingers laced tightly together. Don't worry, he continued, still watching her. I don't mean to be rude. I'm just trying to understand what exactly a delivery girl did to make Vincent risk his entire operation. I didn't do anything, she said softly. I only saved his mother. Dominic studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Let's hope that's all it is. Because in this house, even a small mistake can make a person disappear. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the courtyard, the wind tugging lightly at her sleeves. Above her, the iron gate loomed tall and silent, heavy as the line dividing 2 worlds. Inside lay power. Outside lay freedom. And now Emily understood she was trapped somewhere in between, where every gaze seemed to weigh her. Wondering how long the girl in the rain could survive the storm called Moretti. The next morning, sunlight draped softly over the Moretti garden like a thin blanket of warmth. The roses were beginning to open, releasing a faint fragrance that mingled with the sound of water from the fountain, a scene so peaceful it almost felt unreal. Emily stepped down the stone steps, her shoes tapping lightly against the cold surface. She hadn't slept. Dominic's eyes, cold, sharp, merciless, had haunted her all night. In this house, every smile could hide a question, and every glance could carry a warning. But as she walked into the garden, something stopped her. Eleanor was sitting among the roses, dressed in a white robe, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her delicate face. Beside her sat a small basket of seeds and a notebook. Amaid knelt nearby, trimming dry leaves with careful hands. Eleanor turned at the sound of footsteps and smiled, her voice soft as morning. Emily, you're up. Come. Help me a little. The gentleness in her tone melted the tension that had clung to the air. Emily approached and sat beside her, breathing in the mingled scent of soil and roses. "I've never seen a garden this beautiful," she said quietly. Beautiful Eleanor looked at the roses, her eyes tender with memory. "They're beautiful because they're tended with patience and faith. Every rose needs time to open, just like people." Emily stayed silent, listening to the rhythm in her voice. "You know," Eleanor continued softly, almost to herself, "I used to trust no one. After my husband died, I saw how quickly faces change when money and grief meet. Wealth distorts hearts. Power makes people forget what truly matters, trust." She plucked a rose and placed it gently in Emily's palm. "Vincent learned that lesson from me, but in the wrong way. My son believes you can only trust someone when you've found their weakness. He thinks that's how you stay safe. But you're different." Emily lifted her eyes. "Unsure. Different. Yes." Eleanor smiled faintly. "You dare to trust before you're given a reason. You knelt in the rain to save a stranger, not knowing who she was, whether she was worth saving or not. That is the purest kind of faith, the kind without conditions." Emily looked down at the rose in her hand, feeling the thorn brush her skin. "But sometimes trust hurts," she whispered. "Perhaps." Eleanor nodded. "But trust is also the only thing that keeps us human. Loose it, and you'll live like those outside the gate, strong, but hollow." The wind stirred, carrying a few petals across Eleanor's lap. Emily watched her fragile, yet radiating a calm strength she had never seen before. "Aren't you afraid of betrayal?" Emily asked softly. "I used to be," Eleanor said, "but fear never keeps anyone close. Trust, even when broken, still leaves something worthwhile behind." She paused, her eyes meeting Emily's, gentle yet steady. "You're afraid of Vincent, aren't you?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "He's overwhelming. Everything around him makes me feel small. Vincent isn't as strong as you think," Eleanor said quietly. "He simply learned to hide his wounds. Since his father's death, he's believed that showing emotion means losing control. But since you came, I've seen something return in his eyes, something I thought had died long ago." "What is it?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hope," Eleanor said, smiling softly, her hand resting over Emily's. "And you, my dear, you must hold on to it. Don't let this world take your faith from you, because if you lose it, Vincent will lose what's left of himself." Her words drifted like the breeze, yet settled deep inside Emily's heart. When she left the garden, sunlight streamed through the trees, spilling over the stone path. She didn't know where her life was heading, but something within her had shifted. Beyond those guarded gates, in a world full of suspicion, perhaps true faith still bloomed somewhere. In a garden, and in the hearts of two people who were never meant to find each other. That evening, the Moretti estate blazed like a palace in the heart of the city. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across the old stone walls. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and the rhythmic click of heels mingled with polite laughter, a symphony of power and pretense. Vincent Moretti was hosting an elegant party to celebrate his corporation's latest investment deal. But Emily knew that was only an excuse. This gathering was where the city's elite came to measure who truly pulled the strings. And somehow, tonight, she had become part of the performance. When Marissa handed her a pearl-colored evening gown, Emily hesitated. "I'm not sure I should wear this," she murmured, her gaze tracing the shimmer of the delicate fabric. "Mrs." Eleanor insisted. Marissa replied, her tone flat. Unreadable. "She wants you beside Mr. Vincent tonight. I think you understand what that means." Emily nodded slightly, anxiety pressing against her ribs. In the mirror, she hardly recognized herself no longer, the delivery girl drenched in rain, but a stranger who had wandered into a world that didn't belong to her. When she descended the staircase, Vincent was waiting in the grand foyer. He wore a perfect black suit, the silver tie gleaming under the chandelier's glow. When their eyes met, a small smile flickered on his lips. "Beautiful," he said simply, his low voice making her heart skip. "I don't think I belong here," she whispered. "Tonight? You're here because my mother wants you here," he replied. "Just think of it as dinner. Nothing more." He extended his hand. She placed her small, trembling one in his, feeling the quiet warmth of his strength as they stepped into the ballroom beneath 100 curious gazes. Whispers rippled through the crowd, polite smiles concealing sharp curiosity. Dominic stood across the room, his gaze sweeping over them before settling briefly with an unreadable smirk. A platinum-haired woman approached, a wine glass glinting in her hand. "Vincent Moretti." Bringing a woman to an event, she purred. "Now that's rare." Vincent inclined his head slightly, his smile polite but cool. Everyone has someone they owe a debt to. The woman turned her attention to Emily, eyes scanning her from head to toe. "And who might you be?" Dear Emily tightened her grip on her glass. "I'm someone who once helped Mrs. Eleanor." "Ah, the girl in the rain," the woman said, lips curling. "That story's made quite the rounds. A lovely tale, almost like a fairy tale." Her voice lingered in the air as soft laughter rippled through the circle. Vincent's eyes turned to steel. "We don't need fairy tales here. Lydia," he said quietly, "just the truth who saved my mother." "And who didn't?" The room fell silent. Lydia's smile faltered. She gave a light shrug and slipped away, her perfume fading behind her. Vincent leaned toward Emily, his voice low. "Ignore them. In this world, kindness is something they'll never understand." The music swelled again, a piano's graceful notes mingling with the sound of crystal glasses. Emily glanced around and saw Dominic deep in conversation with several men she didn't recognize, their eyes flicking occasionally toward her and Vincent. The unease in her chest returned, heavier now. Her presence here wasn't just a curiosity, it was a signal, a move in someone's game. Later, Vincent led her out to the balcony for air. The night was cooler, quieter, the lights from the garden below glowing softly where Eleanor often sat. "You know," Vincent said, his gaze fixed on the distant skyline, "sometimes I wish I could live beyond these walls. No eyes watching, no secrets, no one to protect." Emily turned to him, her voice a whisper in the wind. "Maybe you could if you learned how to trust." He looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, the hardness in his eyes softened. "Trust who yourself," she answered. For a long time, Vincent Moretti, the most powerful man in Chicago, said nothing. And under the shimmer of chandeliers and the fading music, Emily felt something shift. For the first time, she wasn't an outsider in his world. She was becoming part of it, though she couldn't yet imagine the price of being seen beside him. When the party ended, the clock had already struck midnight. The last of the guests departed, their laughter dissolving into the chill wind sweeping in from Lake Michigan. Emily stood by the terrace railing, watching the taillights fade into darkness. The scent of wine and expensive perfume lingered in the air. But her heart was heavy. Something had changed. Since Vincent had presented her before the city's elite, curiosity had turned to scrutiny. And behind the smiles lay calculation. She didn't know that somewhere in the shadows, someone had been watching her, someone Vincent never expected. At the far end of the parking lot, a man leaned against a car, cigarette ember glowing between his fingers. His face was half lit, half hidden, eyes of cold gray steel reflecting the night lights. Raymond Cole, a name that had once made Vincent Moretti tread carefully. Once a trusted enforcer within the Moretti security network, Raymond had been cast out for betrayal for siding with Tony Marone. Now, he was back, and his target was clear: Vincent's newly exposed weakness. And that weakness was Emily. Inside the mansion, Vincent and Dominic were speaking in the study, the desk lamp casting narrow halos over thick folders. Dominic folded his arms, his tone sharp. "You're playing with fire." Vincent, parading her in front of the press. "And our partners, do you think that won't have consequences? I don't care what they whisper." Vincent replied, eyes fixed on the documents. "All I care about is Mother's safety and hers." Safety. Dominic gave a bitter laugh. "You've turned her into a target. If I were Marone, I wouldn't go after you. I'd go through her." Vincent looked up, his expression tightening. "And if I hadn't done this, they would have found her anyway. At least now. Everyone knows she's under my protection. No one will dare touch her." Dominic shook his head, exhaling sharply. "You can't protect people forever with power. Vincent, one day, what you built from fear will turn on you." He left, the door closing behind him. Vincent stood alone in the dim light, the silence pressing heavy around him. Outside, Emily was heading back to her room when she heard soft footsteps from the rear garden. She turned, expecting a guard, but saw no one. Leaves rustled faintly. The air felt colder. "Is someone there?" she whispered. No reply. Then, as she turned to leave, a cold hand clamped over her mouth, pulling her violently into the darkness. She struggled, but the grip was iron strong. The acrid mix of gunpowder and smoke filled her lungs. "Shh. Don't scream." Emily Carter. A low voice growled against her ear. "I don't want to hurt you. I just need you to give Vincent a message." Her blood froze. He knew her name. Who are you?" she managed to whisper. "The man Vincent owes in blood." He said, "Tell him I'm back. And this time, I'm not aiming at him." A flash of metal glinted the barrel of a gun pressed lightly against her side. "I'm aiming at his heart." Before she could move, a gunshot cracked through the night, followed by the shout of a guard. "Drop your weapon." Raymond shoved her hard to the ground and vanished into the shadows like a wounded predator. Seconds later, Vincent burst through the rain. "Hun in Hunt." Face pale with fury, he dropped to his knees beside her. "Emily, are you hurt?" She shook her head, breathless, tears streaking through dirt and rain. He said, "He's aiming at your heart." Vincent's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with cold rage. He stood abruptly. "Search the grounds. Seal the gates." Voices and dogs scattered through the storm. But Raymond had disappeared into the night as if he'd never been there. When the chaos faded, Vincent looked down at Emily's trembling hands. He placed his over them, voice low. "I warned you. This darkness spares no one, not even the innocent. But now it's too late. He's chosen you to start with." Emily looked up, and in his eyes, she saw something she had never seen before. Not power, not anger, but fear. Not the fear of losing control, but the fear of losing the one person who made him feel human. Rain began to fall again, the second storm since that night. Emily had saved Eleanor Moretti. It drummed against the roof of the garage like 1,000 war drums. Thunder rumbling beyond the lake. Since Raymond's return, Vincent had barely left the estate. He tightened security, replaced every guard, even moved his mother to the secondary villa. But Emily could sense it. The more he controlled, the more afraid he became, and that frightened her more than anything. She stood by her window, staring out at the rain-soaked garden. The world blurred behind a veil of silver water. Tonight, Vincent had gone to meet Dominic and his advisors. Before leaving, he'd warned her, "Don't open the door for anyone, no matter who calls." But when the clock struck 11:30, she heard it 3 faint knocks at the back door, steady between the rhythm of rain. Her heartbeat quickened. At first, she thought it was a guard, until a voice called softly through the storm, "Emily, open up." "It's me, Vincent." She froze. The voice was deep, but something was wrong. He had never used me when speaking to her. Always, Vincent. Firm and direct. A chill crept up her spine. "Vincent," she whispered. "Where are you, Silence?" Then the voice again. Lower. Impatient. "Hurry. We don't have much time." Emily stepped back, fear clawing at her chest. She grabbed her phone to call him, but the signal flickered. One weak bar left. The knocks came again. Louder this time. Then a metallic screech. Someone was forcing the lock. She backed toward the stairs. Before she could move, the door burst open. Light spilled in, and a tall figure stepped inside. Drenched in rain. A gun glinting under the flash of lightning. Emily screamed. Running down the hall, and then 2 gunshots cracked through the storm. Glass shattered. The man jerked backward and fell. Blood spreading across the wet floor. The main door swung open. Vincent appeared. Drenched and grim. His black coat clinging to him like shadow. 2 guards stormed in behind him, sweeping the room. "Alive, if possible," he ordered. Emily stood trembling, soaked and pale. Vincent walked to her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. His voice dropped low. "I told you they'd come back." Tears mingled with rain as she whispered. He used your voice. I almost believed it was you." Vincent's grip tightened. His eyes burned with fury and something deeper grief. "Raymond Cole," he said quietly, as if naming a ghost. "He was one of my personal guards once. I expelled him for betrayal, but it seems he never left." A guard rushed in, breathless. "Sir." He wasn't alone. "We found tire tracks heading toward the forest." He tried to take her, but changed his plan. Vincent turned toward the rain-soaked darkness beyond the window. He didn't want to take her, he said slowly. "He wanted to lure me." "Lure you," Emily whispered. "Yes," Vincent said, his voice low, heavy as stone. "You're the bait." "Emily, from the very beginning, Raymond wanted me to make the first move." She shook her head, trembling. Why you? Because I'm everything he couldn't be." Vincent said bitterly. "The one my mother still trusts." He looked at her eyes, dark, haunted. "He wants to destroy everything I love, starting with her and ending with you." In that moment, Emily understood a truth she had never wanted to face. Her act of kindness that first night had pulled her into the space between justice and vengeance, where the line between innocence and guilt no longer existed. And outside, the rain kept falling, as if the world itself was trying to wash away the fragile boundary between salvation and retribution. That stormy night did not pass easily for anyone inside the Moretti mansion. Outside, thunder tore through the sky. Inside, people moved quickly, tightening security around every corner. Emily sat quietly on the long sofa in the living room, a thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders, barely keeping out the cold that crept into her skin. Her hands still trembled, still carried the faint smell of rain and gunpowder. The nightmare had not yet ended, but what unsettled her most was not the attack itself. It was the look in Vincent's eyes when he had faced Raymond. In that flash of lightning, she had seen not just rage, but something far deeper: pain, raw and human, as though he had been staring at a reflection of his own broken soul. The door opened. Vincent stepped in, his white shirt streaked with blood that wasn't his. He sat across from her without a word, slowly removing his gloves, his gaze distant. "Did he get away?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper beneath the sound of the storm. "No," Vincent replied curtly. "My men caught him at the edge of the forest. He's in the underground room now." She looked at him, noticing the faint tremor in his shoulders. She couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from something else. "What are you going to do?" The question made him lift his eyes, dark and sharp. You don't want to know. I do, Emily said, her tone firmer than she expected. I've seen too much already. I deserve to know what's happening. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he stood and gestured for her to follow. They walked down the long corridor, descending the narrow staircase into the basement. The smell of damp concrete and metal filled the air. The sound of rain faded to a distant hum. A dim light cast shadows across the cold cement floor, and there, tied to a chair, his head bowed and blood streaking his face, was Raymond. When he heard the door open, he looked up, a crooked smile spreading across his bruised lips. Vincent Moretti, he rasped. Always on time. Vincent stood before him, his expression unreadable. Why, he asked, voice low and cold. Why come back? Raymond spat blood onto the floor and gave a hoarse laugh. Because you took everything from me. My name. My pride. Her trust. I just wanted you to know what it feels like to lose the thing you love most. You mean my mother? Vincent's eyes flickered. No. Raymond sneered. I mean you. I want you to lose your sense of safety. I want you to love something, and then watch it burn. Emily flinched, her heart tightening. Vincent said nothing. He drew his gun, raising it slowly, but his hand trembled. You don't have to do this, Emily whispered, her voice shaking but steady with conviction. You're not like him. Raymond laughed, his voice echoing against the concrete walls. Oh, you're wrong. Rain Girl. He's exactly like me, except he still believes he has the right to decide who gets to live. Vincent turned toward her then, his eyes conflicted, caught between fury and something achingly human. And for the first time, she saw not the ruthless man the city feared, but someone battling himself. He lowered the gun slowly and stepped closer to Raymond. You're wrong, he said quietly. I won't kill you, not because you don't deserve it, but because you're not worth it. You'll live, Raymond, with the fear you created. He signaled to the guards. The clink of chains echoed as they dragged Raymond away. Vincent stood still for a long moment, the weight of silence pressing down on him. Emily stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. You can command an entire city, she said softly, but you can't command your own heart. Can you? He didn't answer. His gaze lifted toward the low ceiling, where the faint light caught the sharp lines of his face. I used to think kindness was weakness, he murmured, that only violence could keep order. But now I understand violence only prolongs loneliness. Kindness, it forces you to see what you've buried. He turned toward her, and his expression softened. You've made me remember who I used to be. Emily. And that is both a gift and a punishment. She didn't reply. She simply looked at him, at the man standing between power and redemption, and saw two souls locked in quiet combat, the cold enforcer, and the man who still knew how to feel. Above them, the rain continued to fall, heavier now, as if trying to wash away guilt or perhaps to deliver judgment. And deep beneath the Moretti mansion, in the dim silence of the basement, Vincent Moretti, the man who once made a city bow, faced the only battle he might never win, the one within himself. By dawn, the Chicago sky unfolded into a soft blush of rose and gold, thin and fragile like silk. Light streamed through the mansion's tall glass windows, glinting off the marble floor still speckled with traces of rain. For the first time in days, the house was quiet, not heavy, not tense, just still. Emily stepped out onto the veranda, her hair damp with morning mist. The garden below had been cleaned and restored. Dew clung to the rose petals, shimmering under the sunlight. A faint breeze carried the scent of new grass and freshly brewed coffee from the kitchen. It was almost impossible to believe that only hours earlier, this place had echoed with gunfire and screams. Eleanor sat on a wicker chair, a wool shawl draped around her shoulders, her gentle eyes gazing out toward the garden. When she saw Emily, she smiled softly. "Did you sleep?" "Dear," she asked, her voice light as morning air. "I tried," Emily replied, "but I can still hear the rain in my head. The storm has passed." "Child," Eleanor said, placing her frail hand over Emily's. It was warm. Impossibly warm. "But I know some storms never really leave us. They just teach us how to find the light after." Emily lowered her gaze, smiling faintly. "You always know how to make things feel lighter." "That's because I've stood where you're standing," Eleanor said. "I've known fear, loss, and mistrust. But one day, a stranger taught me that kindness doesn't need to be returned by blood to matter." She paused, her eyes drifting toward the doorway where Vincent appeared. He wore a white shirt, his face pale and tired, but calmer than Emily had ever seen. When his eyes met hers, they no longer held distance, only warmth, and something that felt like gratitude. Vincent set a cup of coffee on the table. "Mother, the doctor said your blood pressure's stable. You should rest a few more days." "I don't need rest," Eleanor said with a knowing smile. "You've spent your whole life resting for me." "Vincent, it's your turn to learn how to live." Vincent bowed his head slightly, saying nothing. He sat across from Emily, his hands clasped, as though weighing every word. "Raymond won't come back," he said finally, his voice low. "I handed him over to the police. For the first time in years. I didn't take justice into my own hands." Emily looked up, startled. "You turned him in?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Because you were right. I can't command my heart, and I can't fix everything alone." Eleanor's lips curved into a gentle smile. "My son has finally learned what I've hoped for all these years, to trust others." Emily looked at them both and felt something warm rise in her chest. In that quiet morning, she realized she was no longer an outsider in this house. Not because Vincent protected her, not because Eleanor cared for her, but because they had all faced fear and found something stronger than blood trust. Sunlight touched Eleanor's silver hair, turning it to threads of gold. She spoke softly, almost to the morning itself. "Family doesn't need to share blood," she said. "Only a heart." Her words hung in the air, and Vincent went still. He looked at Emily, his eyes steady and clear, then gave a small nod, as though finally accepting a truth he had long denied. Emily smiled back. The sunlight warmed her face. For the first time, the mansion no longer felt like a cage. In that moment, all fear, all pain, seemed to melt into the breeze. Where darkness had once ruled, dawn had come quietly, humbly, like the breath of faith returning to life. And when Vincent stepped into the garden and brushed his hand across the dew-covered roses, Emily knew that the man who had lived his life in shadow had finally begun to learn how to live in the light. That afternoon, rain fell once more over the city of Chicago. But this time, its sound no longer stirred fear in Emily's heart. She stood before the tall window of the Moretti estate, watching the droplets slide down the glass, feeling a strange peace settle inside her. In the courtyard below, Vincent was helping the workers rebuild the greenhouse that the last storm had torn apart. On the veranda, Eleanor sat with a cup of tea in her hands, smiling faintly like a mother, watching her two children rediscover life after the storm. Emily opened the door and stepped outside. The wind carried the chill of rain, the scent of wet earth, and the fragrance of roses, a mix that once made her ache, but now only felt alive. She walked along the stone path leading to the garden, where the roses were blooming again after the storm. Vincent looked up when he saw her. His eyes were gentle now, no longer the guarded eyes of a man who once wore power as his armor. "You'll get wet," he said softly. "It's all right," Emily replied, tilting her face toward the sky. "Rain doesn't scare me anymore." Vincent smiled. And in that smile there was both relief and gratitude. He reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. "The position at the private hospital is ready," he said. "My mother spoke with them. You won't have to run through the rain making deliveries anymore." Emily looked at the envelope, then shook her head lightly. "Thank you. But I think I'll stay in Chicago and start over on my own. I want to live a life that's mine, small. Maybe. But honest." Vincent was silent for a long moment before nodding. "You've done what it's taken me a lifetime to learn to live truthfully." From the veranda, Eleanor's warm voice called out, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Do you two know that roses only bloom after they've been pruned? It hurts, but it makes them more beautiful." Emily turned to look at her, the woman she had once saved out of pure instinct in a stormy night. Now the one who had taught her the meaning of trust and forgiveness. The rain softened, falling in gentle rhythms against the leaves. Vincent stood beside her, both of them looking out across the glistening courtyard. "That night," he said quietly, "if you hadn't stopped in the rain, everything would have been different. You didn't just save my mother, Emily. You saved me." Emily smiled faintly. "No one saves anyone, Vincent. We just help each other find our way back." Her words struck him still. He nodded slowly, his gaze softening. To the east, the clouds parted, and a ribbon of sunlight broke through, scattering over the puddles like 1,000 tiny crystals. The rain kept falling, but in Emily's heart it no longer sounded like loneliness or fear. It was the music of renewal. She lifted her face to the sky, let the raindrops touch her skin, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Rain doesn't scare me anymore." Her voice was quiet, yet it carried clearly, like the closing line of a long, storm-tossed journey. The story of Emily, Vincent, and Eleanor was not merely one of survival. It was a story of compassion, trust, and the quiet power of healing. It reminded us that sometimes kindness can lead us into storms, but it is also the light that guides us back out. You don't need shared blood to be a family, and you don't need power to protect one another. All it takes is a heart willing to love and to trust, and that alone can warm an entire world. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If something in it touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Did Emily and Vincent's journey remind you of someone in your own life? I'd love to hear what you feel from the heart. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the YouTube channel Underworld Love Stories to experience more meaningful and emotional stories every day. Thank you for spending your time on this journey. May you always have good health, joy, and peace in every day of your life. See you again in the next episode of Underworld Love Stories.